Okay, we're going to shift gears here a little bit. And basically we're going to hear from our patient panel. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite Josh Meyers, our Director of Patient Experience, up to the stage. And Josh is going to introduce our patient panel. So, Mr. Meyers.
Thanks, everyone. A lot of hugging and crying before 9:30 this morning. And I don't think that's actually going to change, so get used to it. So I'm really honored to be able to introduce the next two speakers. We have the privilege of having Derick Fage come from Montreal to share a story, as well as Jim. We're going to hear from Derick first, and then I'll welcome Jim up after. So Derick Fage is a self-proclaimed child at heart. Derick is curious about everyone and everything, a quality that serves him well as the host of Breakfast Television Montreal on City TV. In 2012, Derick was awarded the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal for his community work and contributions to charitable organizations. After going public with his personal struggle living with chronic fecal incontinence since birth, he accepted the role of ambassador of the Canadian Continence Foundation in the hopes of helping others who live in similar circumstances. Derick is a member of the board of directors of the foundation, and in 2015, he became the first non-medical professional and patient to speak at the International Continence Society's annual meeting in its 45-year history. And we're very proud at the Patient Experience Conference to have such tremendous contributions from patients, families, and caregivers here at this conference. And I'd like to welcome Derick up to the stage.
Wow, good morning. Incontinence, an exciting topic for us all, isn't it? Especially after breakfast. Let me just start from the beginning and explain what this situation is. I was born with what's called a high imperforate anus, which means I was born without the actual anal opening. So at birth, doctors had to create the anal opening. I like to tell people that doctors made me an asshole. I can get away with a lot. It's not my responsibility. I was also born without a sphincter muscle, which is that handy little muscle that holds everything up. Because of those two situations, I basically have been incontinent since birth. So I suffer from chronic fecal incontinence. I'm sure you can imagine it's had a few challenges in my life, especially in my younger years. I did have an incredible support group around me, but things were difficult. In particular, moving into elementary school, I was bullied relentlessly. It wasn't something that you could easily hide from other kids. I wore diapers to about the age of 13. When I say bullied, I was picked on, shamed, beaten up often in the schoolyard, on my way home. I didn't really think I was any different from any other kid because it's one of those sort of invisible medical conditions that nobody really knows until you have what my family and I used to call accidents. And I'll get to those lovely moments in a few minutes. I mentioned that support group, and the support group was key to me having a great childhood, and I really did. And that's thanks, first of all, to my mom and dad. And they both had separate roles. My mom was the type of mom, she was a stay-at-home mom until my parents divorced when I was 12 years old. I had a brother, a sister, and then after my father remarried, two stepsisters invited into our family. But my mom, during those early years, she played the role of supermom. I would come home, perhaps after school, or even at lunchtime. It's not too easy to hide that you've been beaten up. I'd be thrown off the side of a cliff that we had. We had a creek that ran through on my way to and from school, and I'd be pushed down the creek. I'd come back with bruises and bloodied, and my mom would take me to the school, even though I begged her not to. Take me to the school. She'd tell a member of the staff exactly what happened. She would make me share the names of the kids that were responsible for it, which, as I'm sure you can imagine, was horrifying, because as a child you just think things are going to get worse. But my mom made sure I told her. And the staff would talk to the kids at school, and it didn't really help much, unfortunately. But my mom felt it was important not to ignore it. And without my mom's help, I think during those times, not having somebody that's there to console you each time that you came home, and sometimes it was, mental anguish, not necessarily physical abuse that you needed help from, and my mom was always there. My dad had a different role. My father was a prominent businessman in Ottawa, and he was my go-to. So you can imagine during the years going to school, not having a cell phone, I had to carry change in my pocket just in case I had one of these accidents. And when I decided to go public with the fact that I suffer from fecal incontinence, and I'm a public personality, I host a live television show 5 days a week. It was scary, and I'll tell you how that all came to be, but I decided that I had to be honest in describing it, because we all are very careful when we talk about incontinence, because we have to use the right words. As a matter of fact, when my wife and I landed here in BC, a couple of people asking, what are you doing in BC, in Surrey in particular? Why would you? Everyone was shocked that we decided to come to Surrey. I was like, I'm speaking at a health conference, a patient experience conference here in Surrey. Oh, what are you talking about? I said, I'm the ambassador for the Canadian Continence Foundation. I've suffered from incontinence since birth. And they're like, what is that? And it's, my wife and I sort of look at each other, okay, here we go. Got to do the explanation to somebody, because I don't think it comes, when people hear continence and incontinence, I don't really think they understand exactly what it means. So when I'm telling you I had an accident, I'd have an accident so bad at school that I would have to tuck my pants into my socks so that it didn't leak onto the floor. I'd have to make my way to a payphone. I went into my stealth mode, as I used to call it, became invisible. It's funny, when you think you're invisible, you really believe you're invisible. I would go around along the walls at school so no one could see that I had crapped myself, and I'd get on the phone, and I'd say to my dad could be sitting across from a multi-million-dollar client. And I'd say to my dad, it's me, I've had an accident. My dad would excuse himself and say, I've got a minor family emergency, I've got to go. And he would. He would put off that client, and he would come and get me. And as you can imagine, when something like that happens when you're, 10, 11, 12 years old, you do everything in your power to make sure that nobody knows what's gone on. And I would be hiding in the parking lot, waiting for my dad, and I'd feel sorry for him, because my dad would pull up into the parking lot, get out of the van, and wander around the parking lot to figure out where the heck I was. And this is a true story. One day, I had soiled myself so bad, it had leaked through my legs, the back of my pants, the front. It was in the fall, and I had to hide myself in a pile of leaves. I was sitting in the bushes in the parking lot in a pile of leaves, and some kids saw me, and they came around to ask, what are you doing in a pile of leaves? And of course, you had to use your imagination. You're a young person, and I don't even remember what I made up, but just said, how much I love fall, and, be sitting there. Don't you guys? Don't you love, just jumping in the leaves? I think you're nuts. And my dad pulled up, and he saw me, and my dad's like, oh my God, I've got to get him out of this. And my dad would always, he'd have garbage bags ready, because he'd line the seat with garbage bags. I wasn't going to ruin his upholstery. We're family. Can't do that. And he'd cut holes in the garbage bag so I could slide it through. So my dad sees that I'm in this situation. He would stealthily move the kids aside, start talking to them, and then I felt like Dukes of Hazzard. I'd dive through the van window, slide on the garbage bag, and we went home. And people always ask me, how would you overcome something like that? That's a traumatic situation for a young person And sometimes, I couldn't hide it. And I said, I don't really, I think we all are gifted things in life. And I was gifted that when the incident occurred and I went home and I had my cry and I cleaned up, my thought was, okay, that's one incident in a long life ahead. I can't just carry that on throughout the rest of my day, because it's just going to ruin the experience of living. And even as a young person, I just thought that. I don't know where it came from, but as I said, I think it was just a gift that I could just forget about it and move on. Now, certainly not always forgotten. In my late teens, early 20s, probably was the most difficult part of my life. I'll get to that in just a minute, because I want to get back to the support group. So support group being very important. So of course, my mom and dad, number one. My brother, my sister, my stepsisters, my stepmother, my stepfather eventually, extended family, aunts, uncles, friends of the family. These are all important people in your life. But I think for all of us, we search for that special stranger. You look for that best friend in life. And I didn't really have a best friend, I think, for most kids until a little bit later on in life. It was in grade 6. And I started a new school. And I was nervous. Excited in one respect, because I was getting away from the school I attended for 5 years, a lot of the same students perhaps not coming to the new school, so I got to have a fresh start. I've had many fresh starts in my life. I call them sort of rebirths. And I thought, grade 6, this is it. It's a new rebirth for me. I'm going to a new school, going to meet new people. Day 1, I'm coming around a corner fast because I'm late, and I run into somebody. Our books go flying. It was like a scene from a movie. Our books go flying. And I'm scared to death. I'm like, oh my God, this is the way I'm starting new school. This isn't good. And I run into this young man. His name's Gary Fields. And I'm scared to death that, oh my God, this guy is probably just going to beat me up for running into him. And he starts laughing. And he introduces himself. And I said, are you a real human boy? This doesn't happen. He introduces himself. And he apologizes. We help pick up books and so forth. And we end up becoming fast friends. Same sense of humor, same sort of sense of caring. Both had this vulnerability. I think Gary got it from his parents and his father's own struggles with Crohn's and colitis, which I didn't find out until probably a couple of years after I met Gary. And Gary was the first person outside of my family unit that I told that I had this condition. And as a 12-year-old boy, it was probably the most difficult moment of my life leading up to those, that first 12 years. I finally had the courage to tell somebody that wasn't already told by my family. And I told Gary. And he just shrugged his shoulders. I said, that's it? You're just shrugging your shoulders? I just told you I crap myself. I mean, we got to have a moment here or something. And he's like, I don't care. I mean, what's the big deal? This is what a special friend is. So Gary and I, we were inseparable. Did everything together. He was my superhero. Gary was the superhero that wore no capes. We would go to the movies. And we would sit there at the theater, and I would have an accident. I would lean over to Gary and I'd whisper in his ear. I said, buddy, I've had an accident. And the guilt that you feel, it's like we're in the middle of a great movie. I gotta go. I'd whisper to Gary, and he would get up and he would walk behind me all the way to the bathroom to make sure that nobody saw that I saw him. This is a 13-year-old boy, 14-year-old boy. Would follow me to the bathroom, let me clean myself up. There were occasions where I soiled myself so bad that Gary would follow me all the way home. I didn't live just around the street from the movie theater. Gary would follow me the entire way home. I'd have the most ridiculous conversation talking to Gary, like this the whole way. People probably wondering what is going on. But that's so special to find that special person in your life, that special stranger, and I needed it at the time. And I said to you, late teens, early 20s, most difficult period of my life. I was self-medicating with drugs and alcohol. I was scared to death about having an intimate relationship. I was desperate for a girlfriend. You know, you find your best friend, and now I thought, okay, I got the best friend, now I need a girlfriend. But then thought to myself, it's impossible. As I got intimate with a woman, I just felt she's going to find that I'm absolutely disgusting, How do I explain that? And, as a young person, you just don't think that someone will understand. So during that dark time, I was actually living with Gary at the time. And I planned my own suicide. I planned to take my own life. I had the night planned out. I had a lot to drink. Gary was down the hall from me. It was late at night. He had gone to bed. And I had everything arranged. And in that moment, you're scared, right? And I started thinking, geez, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. It was very confusing. And something dawned on me at that moment was that I was really unhappy, very depressed. And I had always had this pursuit of happiness. No matter what happens, I'm going to find a way to be happy. I'll pretend to be happy until I'm actually happy. And in that unhappiness, maybe this is, I have to recognize that I'm depressed and unhappy. I have to take responsibility and control of that. And then I thought about all those people that supported me throughout all those years. Right? Because life isn't just about you. There's a lot of people in your life that invest a lot in you. A lot of time, and more importantly, a lot of love. And I was thinking, what if I take my own life tonight, what's that going to do to my mom and my dad and my brother and sisters and my extended family? Do I not owe it to them to be alive tomorrow? And then I thought about that best friend down the hall. And what's going to happen to him? He's going to walk into this room tomorrow morning and find his best friend dead and find out that I never reached out to him. That Gary never knew that I was going to take my own life that night until about 28 years later. And when I shared the story publicly, he wrote me and he said, well, why didn't you talk to me? But when you're in deep depression, unfortunately, you don't think right. You don't make necessarily the best choices. And I'm just glad I had that epiphany. And from that point on, I decided to say to myself, okay, I've told my best friend, I've shared it with friends of the family. What if I started telling more people? What would really happen if I started telling more people? So at that point, I decided I'm going to start telling just casual friends about it. Everyone had the same reaction, like they didn't care. It's amazing. You start telling people and how comfortable you become all of a sudden in something you're so ashamed of. It's people just recognizing that It's no fault of your own. It's a medical condition. It's bad luck that you were born with. So as I said earlier, suffering from incontinence, I mean, what better thing to get involved with than television? Great idea. Growing up, I had some game changers. I was a hyper kid too. My mom used to say to me, if Ritalin was popular when you were a kid, maximum dosage. For somebody that wanted to be invisible, when an accident happened, I was the opposite the rest of the time. And I have to thank my parents because they helped me find that place where I could, release all of this energy. Sports was one, and theater was another. And I didn't just play one sport. I had a chip on my shoulder. I played everything. I joined everything. I joined football. I joined rugby. I joined soccer. I joined individual sports like diving and swimming. I went to summer camp, overnight camp. Am I nuts? Like my brother and sister went, they came back and told me about the experience they had at camp. I was scared to death and I said, oh my God, you went what? You sailed and you went canoeing and kayaking and you rappelling? I have to do all of these things. And I did. And I was the smallest kid, I was the skinniest kid. What I lacked in muscle, I certainly didn't lack in enthusiasm. And I was very, very competitive. So yeah, I got into theater, and then my stepmother sees an ad in the paper that they're looking for a host of a local community television show in Ottawa. She said, oh, you'd be perfect. And I don't know. I hemmed and hawed. She said, no, you know what? Just do it. So I auditioned. I competed against 4 other people. It was like an online voting process. And I ended up getting the job. Funny thing, I didn't even think it was a paid position. I was like, I'll do it for free. This is great. And then they told me, oh, you're getting a $50 honorarium for 3 hours a day. So I worked full-time at my father's accounting firm, 6.5 hours a day. And then I worked 3 hours a day doing this television show, and then spent my evenings researching to do the television show. I was probably working 12 hours a day. I didn't care. I was like, oh my God, this is what I want to do. I wanted to be a film or television actor. And then all of a sudden this hosting job fell in my lap. And the best thing about the job was they just want me to be me. I don't even have to act. I just have to go, show up, and interview these incredibly inspirational people. So I did that for years and years. And then, one day in the green room, we had a great atmosphere at Rogers Community Television in Ottawa. You got to meet all the guests before the show. So we'd have about a half hour before the show went live, and we got to meet all the guests. And I have a chance meeting with the executive director of the Canadian Continence Foundation. She's my guest on the show. I had never even heard of the Canadian Continence Foundation. No idea it existed. And she was there with another woman who was selling a product of some kind, a mattress where a blanket you could just rip off with Velcro. My poor mother, she would have loved this thing. Accidents at night were like horrifying for her, like, oh my God, I gotta change the bed and then, clean it up. Anyway, so I meet this woman, and then in passing, I just sort of say it nonchalantly, oh, by the way, I suffer from chronic fecal incontinence. And her reaction is, no way. Whoa, lady. It's a little too much excitement about fecal incontinence. She says, does everybody know? I said, of course not. It's fecal incontinence. Of course not everybody knows. She said, well, would you mind sharing it on the show this morning? Like live? She said, yeah, it'd be so important to have a public figure like you. I've been in television for 11 years up to that point. It'd be so important to have a public figure like you tell people that you suffer from incontinence. It'd be great for the foundation, to raise awareness. And I went, yeah, sure. What the hell? I think it's time, I'm in my 40s. What do I have to lose? So I say, yeah. So I shared it on live television, and then I shared it on social media. Wrote out my story on social media and shared it. And then cowered at home for days. No, I didn't. I shared it, and the outpouring of support was absolutely overwhelming. I couldn't believe it. Complete strangers started sending me messages. Some of them beautiful and some of them heartbreaking. One woman sends me a note saying that she has suffered from incontinence for 28 years and she has not left her home except to go to do groceries and to doctor's appointments. Another woman writes me and says that her father has suffered from incontinence now for a year. He has not left the house. Not for a wedding, not for a funeral, not to go out to dinner, because he's too worried about having an accident in public. And what is he going to do? So I thought, well, you know what? I could perhaps make a difference in these people's lives. Listen, I'm a public figure. I am now doing it, by the way. So the television show in Ottawa was live for an hour every day. I didn't think that was enough. My television show in Montreal is now 3 hours live every day. And I've had accidents live on the air. I actually shared it on social media one day when I had an accident. Ironically enough, during Continence Awareness Week, I had, it's no word of a lie, maybe it was a psychological thing, but I had an accident and shared it on social media. And I'll be honest with you, I mean, I've still had colleagues over the years that have talked behind my back and said humiliating comments about me. But I didn't let it bother me. The impact that you have when you share your vulnerabilities with people is so greater. It's, you have to ignore the very few negatives because the positives outweigh them so much. So, getting back to the executive director of the Canadian Continence Foundation, I share it, and then a few days later, she calls me up. She says, Derick, that was an amazing thing. Would you be interested in being the ambassador, sort of the face of the Canadian Continence Foundation? I didn't even think twice. I said, yeah, absolutely. Sure. What do you need me to do? Well, we need a picture, and can we put up a bio on the website and so forth? And, would you do speaking engagements and help raise awareness? Sure. I didn't even call my wife to say, hey, this has been offered. I just said yes, right on the spot. And it's been an incredible experience. I ended up doing a TEDx talk in Montreal on it. Opened up a lot of doors, such as being invited here. My wife and I were in Italy earlier this year, Rome, at the Global Forum on Incontinence. It was an incredible experience. And when you share vulnerabilities, you show your authentic self. It's incredible how you can all of a sudden connect with people. As much as we're on social media and we're on our phones all the time, the human connection is the most important part in our lives. Like we need it. It nurtures us. Without it, it's a lonely life. And I'll leave you. I think I'm running out of time. Am I running out of time? What's my time like? I got a few. Okay. I should have put a timer on here. My dad would be very disappointed. It's like, make sure you don't go over your time when you do a talk. People will be upset with you. So, after all of this, I became a member of the board of directors of the Canadian Continence Foundation. We're working on some just amazing things right now. Things, unfortunately, that I can't necessarily share. But what I will tell you is that my focus has not been on the physical side of things, because there's a lot of great work being done with treatment and research. There's a lot of great products on the market, for people that suffer from incontinence. But there's a few things that I've targeted, and one is the mental health issues for those suffering from incontinence. We estimate there's about 400 million people in the world that suffer from some form of incontinence. Urinary incontinence, of course, being the most common. Fecal incontinence, we don't even have numbers because, well, people don't share it. People don't even share it with their family doctor. I know people that haven't shared it with their spouse, that they have urinary incontinence. So the physical thing and the products are great. The problem being is that we're isolating ourselves. People that live with incontinence, they're isolating themselves. You know that the Red Cross is calling isolation an epidemic. They just released that this year. The United Kingdom has just put, for the first time ever, they have a minister of loneliness. When they did surveys, they felt that the epidemic of isolation and loneliness was so severe that they needed a minister responsible for people being lonely. Now, I'm just using the example of continence, being incontinent. I mean, people are suffering from many different challenges in isolating themselves, but the mental health side is one of the big targets for us at the foundation. The other is the cost. The cost of products, you would not believe. You imagine how many people have kids? Cost of diapers for kids? Crazy. Cost of diapers for adults? Insane. If you were on a fixed income, or you're from in a low-income family, you are spending probably $140 a month on product, depending on how bad your incontinence is. You know why people don't leave home? Because they can't afford to buy the product, so they stay home. We are trying to lobby the government in Canada to get it reimbursed for people on low income and fixed income. The problem being, for governments, of course, is they want a return on investment, right? If we're going to give money back to you guys, what is it doing for us? Well, this is what we're proposing. You know what it does? It gets people out of their homes. You get people out of their homes, they live a happier life. Get people out of their homes, guess where they spend their money? In their community, which drives the economy. You know, now, trying to get to the right person to send that message, that has been an issue for us. But we are making some headway in that. The other issue is, I can speak from a male perspective. Products are great. I can afford the products. So, I've got we're not allowed to say adult diaper, by the way, but I'm going to say it because, well, that's what it is. I think we're calling them guards or protection or something now because diaper just freaks people out too much as adults. But adult diapers, so that's great. I can afford the product. I grab the product. I put it in my sash. I get to walk around with my sash and my product around town so that I feel good. I can go out and have dinner. Now, I'm at a restaurant with my wife. All of a sudden, I have an accident. I go into the bathroom, which is a public bathroom, and I have to change. After I change, I open the stall door, and there are the other men in the bathroom. And I'm holding this, right? No one wants to do that. I go for dinner at your house. You invite me over for dinner, I have an accident. I go into your bathroom, change, okay, great. And then I walk out and go, Dorothy, where can I put this? Right? If you haven't told people, that's why I've told people too. Now I can go to someone's house and have dinner and, they know my issue, so that's fine. But for people that haven't got to the point where I'm at, what do we do? So I brought up a proposal when I was in Rome speaking of, for many women's washrooms, now not all, but women's stalls, you have the sanitary bins. Hoping to get sanitary bins everywhere in all public washrooms. Pretty easy thing to do, really. They're already there in most women's stalls. Just put them in the men's stalls as well. A woman from the UK took this to Parliament and made a suggestion of it, and it looks like it's going to go through. She just sent me a letter a couple of weeks ago. Pretty exciting that it happened that quickly. From April till now, they're actually thinking of it right in London and hopefully in Britain, the Greater Britain. But just, small little proposals like that can make a world of difference in someone's happiness and, being able to get out and socialize and enjoy everything life has to offer. Because as I've told people, if you suffer from incontinence you know what? I'm leading a very public life. I still go swimming and water skiing and downhill skiing, and I go out for dinner. I do speaking engagements in front of hundreds, sometimes thousands of people. Do I still have the concern in the back of my mind every now and then? Sure, but it is what it is. The good news is I've done most of my talking engagements with people like you who are in the health field. So it feels really good as that scope sort of broadens and you start talking to everyday people, you get a little more nervous about sharing it because, even when I shared it, did I want to shout from the rooftops and let everyone know I suffered from incontinence? No, but slowly but surely, as I described my story and saw how much it helped, not just people that suffer from incontinence, you can suffer from any sort of challenge. I mean, I'm sure some of you in this room have suffered from depression, anxiety, had panic attacks, perhaps suicidal thoughts. When somebody else talks about it and you realize that you recognize yourself in somebody's story, you feel better about sharing your own. And I'm going to end on this message. This is a great quote. It's been attributed to many, many people over the years. And it's, some people may not remember what you did in life. People may not remember what you said necessarily in life, but they will remember how you made them feel. So make people feel good in your life. So much easier than being miserable. So much more effort put into being a miserable person and making other people's lives miserable than making people feel good. How often have you told somebody at work, hey, you did a great job on that. Sometimes it's great to do it because just to see the reaction, they're like, what? What do you mean? Someone say something? No, you did a great job. And then the more you say it, the more people become used to it. They're like, oh, thanks, man. Yeah, you too. So I'll leave you with that. Make people feel good in your life. Thank you so much for having me here today. I really appreciate it.